My sister Isabella spent the entire week calling me an embarrassment, demanding I dress better for her high-stakes dinner. She thought she was dressing to impress a billionaire. She just didn't realize she was playing hostess with my money. I didn't just walk out, I took my black card with me. To understand how I ended up standing on the wet pavement of Manhattan's Upper East Side, holding my Amex Centurion card while my sister practically shoved me out the door of a 3 Michelin-star restaurant, you have to understand the dynamic between Isabella and me. Isabella is 3 years older than me, and for our entire lives, she has been the absolute center of our family's universe. She was the pageant winner, the varsity cheerleader, the girl who married the perfect finance guy, Preston Harding. Preston is a junior partner at a wealth management firm who drives a leased Porsche Taycan, wears a Rolex Submariner he bought on a 5-year financing plan, and speaks almost entirely in golf metaphors. They are what I like to call Instagram wealthy. Their entire existence is a meticulously curated feed of beige luxury, endless brunches, and loud designer logos designed to project an image of unfathomable success. Behind the scenes, however, they are drowning. They max out their credit cards to maintain the illusion. I, on the other hand, am the exact opposite. My name is Amelia. I was the quiet nerd who spent her weekends coding in her bedroom while Isabella was sneaking out to frat parties. When I was 26, I developed a proprietary cybersecurity algorithm that I sold to a major tech conglomerate in Silicon Valley for an 8-figure sum. I didn't buy a mansion. I didn't buy a fleet of supercars. I bought a comfortable brownstone in Brooklyn, invested the rest quietly, and continued wearing the same comfortable clothes I always had. I like flying under the radar. True wealth whispers, fake wealth screams. Unfortunately, Isabella found out about my financial status about 2 years ago. We were at our parents' house for Thanksgiving, and she snooped through my purse looking for a stick of gum. Instead, she found my American Express Centurion card, the infamous black card. You don't just apply for one of those. You have to be invited, and the spending requirements are astronomical. The moment Isabella saw that heavy, anodized titanium card, her entire relationship with me shifted. Suddenly, the sister she used to mock for wearing glasses and reading too much was her absolute best friend. It started with small things. "Oh, Amelia, could you cover this lunch? I forgot my wallet." Then it escalated to, "Amelia, Preston's bonus is delayed. Can you front us the money for our trip to Aspen? We'll pay you back." They never did. I tolerated it because I love my sister, despite her flaws, and because my parents constantly pressured me to help out the golden couple. But the real breaking point began 3 weeks ago. Isabella called me, practically hyperventilating with excitement. Preston was on the verge of landing a massive career-defining promotion. His firm was trying to bring in a new whale of a client, Richard Gallagher. Richard is a legendary private equity titan, old money, ruthlessly sharp, and notoriously difficult to impress. Preston's boss had essentially told him that if he could wine, dine, and sign Richard Gallagher, the senior partner track was his. "We are taking him to Lake Hume," Isabella announced over the phone, her voice trembling with the sheer magnitude of the name drop. Lake Hume is currently the most impossible reservation in New York City. It's an ultra-exclusive, obscenely expensive French-tasting menu establishment where a standard dinner for two easily clears $3,000 before you even look at the wine list. "That's great, Izzy," I said, typing on my laptop while she spoke. "Good luck to Preston." "Well, here's the thing," she said, her voice dropping an octave into that sickly sweet tone she uses when she wants something. "We booked the private dining room, the Lavinia room. It's gorgeous, Amelia. It has its own sommelier. But the restaurant requires a $15,000 minimum spend for that room." I stopped typing. "Okay. And Preston's corporate card has a strict limit, and you know how tight things are right now with the mortgage on the Hamptons summer rental." She paused, waiting for me to take the bait. When I didn't say anything, she sighed. "Amelia, we want you there. You're my sister. Your family. It would mean the world to me if you came to this dinner. You're so smart, you could totally help Preston talk business with Richard." I saw right through her. She didn't want my business acumen. She wanted my titanium card. Preston and Isabella simply did not have the liquid cash or the credit limit to guarantee a $15,000 dinner. If they failed to hit the minimum, or if the bill was declined, Preston's career would be over before the dessert course. Against my better judgment, I agreed. I told myself I was doing it for our parents, who would never hear the end of it if I let Isabella's big night fall apart. Thank you, thank you, thank you, Isabella shrieked. It's next Friday at 8 p.m. Oh, and Amelia? Please, please dress up. This is Richard Gallagher. We need to look like we belong. I know how to dress for a nice dinner, Isabella, I replied, rolling my eyes. When Friday rolled around, I took my time getting ready. I don't do flashy. I don't own clothes with giant interlocking letters or garish patterns. Instead, I opted for quiet luxury. I wore a pair of perfectly tailored, charcoal gray trousers from the Row, a navy blue cashmere turtleneck from Loro Piana that felt like wearing a cloud, and a pair of classic black Christian Louboutin pumps. I tied my hair back into a sleek, neat chignon and put on my vintage Cartier tank, watch a piece that cost more than Preston's leased car, but only someone who truly knew horology would recognize it. I looked professional, refined, and effortlessly polished. I ordered an Uber Black and headed to L'Écume. I had no idea I was walking straight into a firing squad. L'Écume was intimidating by design. Located behind an unmarked, heavy oak door in Tribeca, it had no signage, only a subtle brass plaque and an imposing doorman standing guard. Inside, the atmosphere was dark, moody, and dripped in money. The scent of black truffles, roasted bone marrow, and expensive perfume hung heavy in the air. I checked my coat and gave my name to the maître d', a tall, severely handsome Frenchman named Antoine. Ah, yes, mademoiselle. You are with the Harding party in the Lavigne room, Antoine murmured, giving a polite nod. They have already arrived. Right this way. I followed Antoine down a dimly lit hallway lined with glass-enclosed wine cellars. As we approached the private room, I saw Isabella standing in the hallway outside the heavy velvet curtains that separated the room from the main restaurant. She was pacing anxiously, holding a glass of champagne. When I say Isabella was dressed up, I mean she looked like a walking advertisement for a luxury department store. She was wearing a skin-tight emerald green Gucci dress, featuring a belt with a massive, glittering G-buckle. She had layered on heavy gold Chanel necklaces, and she was clutching a bright red Hermès Birkin bag that I knew for a fact was a high-tier replica she'd bought online. Preston, standing behind her, looked like he had been poured into a pinstripe suit that was half a size too small, his hair slicked back with an alarming amount of gel. Isabella stopped pacing the moment she saw me. Her eyes darted from my neat hair to my plain navy turtleneck, down to my unassuming charcoal trousers. I watched the color completely drain from her face. Isabella, I said, offering a warm smile. You look nice. Hi, Preston. Isabella didn't say hello. She didn't hug me. Instead, she grabbed my arm with fingers like talons, her perfectly manicured acrylic nails digging into my Loro Piana cashmere. What are you wearing? She hissed, her voice a frantic, venomous whisper. She looked around as if afraid one of the waitstaff might witness the crime of my outfit. Clothes? I replied, bewildered. Isabella, let go of me. You're digging into my arm. I told you to dress up, she spat, violently dragging me away from the entrance of the private room and toward a small alcove near the restrooms. Preston stayed behind, looking utterly terrified, clutching his phone like a lifeline. I am dressed up, I said, defensively brushing my sleeve where she had grabbed me. These are quality clothes, Izzy. I look fine. You look like a substitute teacher, Isabella Whisper screamed, her eyes wide with panic and rage. You look like a hobo. This is L'Écume, Amelia. Do you have any idea who is sitting in that room right now? Richard Gallagher. The man is worth $2 billion. He is wearing a custom Brioni suit, and his wife is draped in diamonds. And you show up wearing a plain, boring, cheap-looking sweater? I felt a hot flush of anger rise in my chest. This cheap-looking sweater cost more than your rent, Isabella. Not that it's any of your business. I look professional. I'm not here to walk a runway. I'm here to eat dinner. You are here to make Preston look good, she fired back, her voice shaking. We need to project power, wealth, and status. Look at me. She gestured wildly to her counterfeit Birkin and her logo-heavy belt. This is what rich people look like. You look like you just got off a shift at the public library. If Richard sees you sitting at our table, he's going to think Preston comes from a family of nobodies. You are going to embarrass us. You are going to ruin Preston's career. I stared at her. For 28 years, I had put up with her belittling comments, her arrogance, and her blatant user mentality. But standing there in the dimly lit hallway of a restaurant she couldn't afford, being called an embarrassment by a woman who was faking every single aspect of her lifestyle, something inside me finally snapped. The sheer, unadulterated audacity of it was breathtaking. "I'm an embarrassment to you?" I asked, my voice dropping to a low, dangerously calm register. "Yes," Isabella snapped, flipping her hair over her shoulder. "Honestly, Amelia, I don't even know why I invited you. You always do this. You have zero social awareness. You don't know how to play the game. You invited me because you need my credit card, Isabella," I stated plainly, stripping away all the polite family fiction. "You booked a $15,000 minimum spend room, and you don't have the money to pay for it. You invited my wallet, not me." Isabella flushed a deep, ugly shade of red, but she didn't back down. "So what if I did? That's what family is for. You have all this money sitting around doing nothing, while Preston and I are actually out here grinding, trying to make something of ourselves. The least you can do is support us." I let out a harsh, dry laugh. "Support you? You just called me a hobo and dragged me into a corner like a dirty secret." "Because you look like one," she retorted fiercely. She crossed her arms, a look of desperate entitlement settling over her features. She took a deep breath, trying to regain her composure, and adopted a patronizing tone. "Look, Amelia, let's just be practical. If you walk into that room looking like that, Preston is going to lose this account. We cannot risk it. It's better if you just don't sit with us." I blinked. "Are you uninviting me to the dinner? Right now? Before the appetizers are even served?" "It's for the best," Isabella said, waving her hand dismissively. "You wouldn't understand the conversation anyway. It's high-level finance. Just give me your card. I'll put the dinner on it, and I'll bring the card back to your house tomorrow morning. You can just go home, order some takeout. It's more your speed anyway." She actually held out her hand, palm up, waiting for me to hand over my Amex Centurion card so she could use my money to impress a billionaire, while sending me home in an Uber like an unwanted dog. The silence between us stretched for 5 agonizing seconds. I looked at her outstretched hand, perfectly manicured, trembling slightly with expectation. I looked at the desperate greed in her eyes. And then, a profound sense of clarity washed over me. I wasn't hurt anymore. I was liberated. "You want me to leave?" I said slowly, making sure I had the facts absolutely straight. "Yes," she said, wiggling her fingers impatiently. "Card, please. Richard is waiting." I reached into my small, understated clutch. I felt the cool, heavy metal of the black card against my fingertips. I pulled it out. Isabella's eyes tracked the movement of the titanium card, like a hawk spotting a mouse. Her lips curled into a victorious, greedy little smile. I held the card up, and then, maintaining unblinking eye contact with my sister, I dropped it right back into my clutch and snapped the clasp shut with a sharp click. Isabella's smile vanished. "What are you doing?" "I'm taking your advice," I said, my voice smooth as glass. "I'm leaving. I wouldn't want to embarrass you in front of Mr. Gallagher with my cheap sweater." Panic instantly replaced the arrogance on her face. "Amelia, stop playing around. Give me the card. Preston has to order the 1,996 Dom Perignon in 5 minutes. Better tell Preston to check his credit limit." Then, I smiled, taking a step backward toward the main exit. "Because I'm not paying for a single drop of it." "You can't do this," Isabella whisper shrieked, lunging forward to grab my arm again. I stepped out of her reach. "We're already locked into the minimum spend. The restaurant has my card on file for the $5,000 deposit. If we don't cover the rest, it's going to bounce. Preston will be ruined." "Should have thought about that before you called your sole financial backer a hobo," I replied coldly. "Have a wonderful dinner, Isabella. Make sure you chew slowly, it's going to cost you." "Amelia, get back here," she demanded, her voice cracking as true terror set in. I didn't look back. I turned on my heel and walked gracefully out of the dimly lit corridor, past a bewildered Antoine the maitre d', and out the heavy oak doors into the cool Manhattan night air. I didn't head home, though. The night was young, and I had a feeling the real show was just about to begin. There was an upscale cocktail lounge directly across the street, with large floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a perfect, unobstructed view of L'Écume's front entrance. I crossed the street, walked into the lounge, ordered a very expensive, very dry gin martini, and took a seat by the window. I set my phone face up on the table, took a sip of my drink, and waited for the explosion. Sitting in the dimly lit, velvet-upholstered booth of the Starlight Lounge across the street, I had a front-row seat to the impending disaster. I ordered a second dry gin martini, the crystal glass cool against my palm, and simply watched the heavy oak doors of L'Écume. For the first 20 minutes, my phone remained blissfully silent. I imagined Isabella and Preston inside, smiling tightly, pretending I was merely running late or had encountered an emergency. But as the clock ticked past 8:45 p.m., right around the time the sommelier would typically arrive to present the first bottle of astronomically priced vintage wine, my phone screen illuminated the dark table. It was a barrage, a digital manifestation of a meltdown. Isabella, 8:46 p.m. Amelia, I am not playing. Come back inside right now. Antoine is asking for a card to keep on file for the private room minimum. Isabella, 8:49 p.m. Answer me. Preston is stalling by asking Richard about his golf swing, but the waiter is literally standing here with the Dom Perignon. Isabella, 8:55 p.m. Amelia, please. I am begging you. I'm sorry I said those things. You look beautiful in your sweater. Just bring the card. I picked up my phone, took a slow, deliberate sip of my martini, and typed a single response. Me, 8:57 p.m. I thought I looked like a substitute teacher. Good luck with the $15K minimum. Tell Preston to pace himself on the tap water. I flipped the phone face down. It vibrated furiously for the next hour, practically dancing across the polished mahogany table. I didn't need to read the messages to know what was happening. I could picture it perfectly. Preston, tugging at the collar of his ill-fitting suit, sweating profusely as he tried to navigate a tasting menu he couldn't pronounce, let alone afford. Isabella, clutching her counterfeit Birkin, her fake smile cracking a little more with every course that was cleared away. They were trapped in a cage of their own making, constructed entirely of their desperate need to appear wealthy. Around 10:30 p.m., the grand finale of their evening began to materialize. The heavy oak doors of L'Écume swung open. Out stepped Richard Gallagher. Even from across the street, the man radiated an imposing aura. He was tall, silver-haired, and wearing a perfectly tailored charcoal suit that screamed old money. His wife, Beatrice, stepped out beside him, wrapping a luxurious cashmere shawl around her shoulders. They looked completely unbothered, exchanging a brief, polite handshake with Preston, who had practically tumbled out of the restaurant behind them. Preston looked like he had aged a decade. His face was a sickly shade of gray, and he was bowing slightly, nodding frantically at whatever Richard was saying. Isabella stood slightly behind him, her arms crossed, shivering in her thin Gucci dress, completely stripped of her previous arrogance. Richard and Beatrice stepped into a waiting black town car and glided away into the night. The moment the taillights disappeared, Preston turned on Isabella. Even through the soundproof glass of the lounge, I could tell it was explosive. He threw his hands up, gesturing wildly toward the restaurant. Isabella shrank back, yelling right back at him, pointing furiously down the street, presumably in the direction she thought I had fled. It was time to collect the check. I paid my tab, tipped the bartender generously, and walked out into the cool air. I crossed the cobblestone street slowly, the click of my Christian Louboutin pumps echoing in the quiet night. As I approached the glowing brass plaque of L'Écume, Isabella spotted me. "You!" she shrieked, her voice echoing down the block. She lunged toward me, but Preston grabbed her arm, holding her back. "You ruined us! You completely ruined us!" "I didn't do anything, Isabella," I said calmly, stopping a few feet away from them. "I simply removed my embarrassing self from your vicinity. How was the tasting menu?" Preston looked like he was on the verge of tears. "They ran my corporate card," he choked out, his voice hoarse. It declined. It declined on a $14,000 bill. Amelia, Antoine brought the manager. They made us call my bank from the table. Richard sat there and watched the whole thing. He watched my card get declined 3 times. "That sounds incredibly stressful," I replied, my tone flat. "What did you end up doing?" "I had to empty our joint savings account," Isabella sobbed, makeup running down her face in dark, ugly streaks. and max out 3 different personal credit cards just to cover the bill and the mandatory gratuity. We have nothing left. We can't even make rent next month. Well, you projected wealth, I pointed out, gesturing to her outfit. Isn't that what you wanted? You played the game. Why did you do this to us? Preston demanded, finally finding his anger. He stepped forward, trying to look intimidating. You had the money. It's pocket change to you. You maliciously set us up to fail. I set you up? I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. Preston, you booked a room you couldn't afford to impress a man you don't know. Your wife dragged me into a hallway, insulted me, told me I was an embarrassment, and then demanded my black card so she could send me home like a servant. I didn't set you up. I just let you face the consequences of your own actions. You are a selfish, spiteful little Isabella started, taking a menacing step toward me. Is there a problem out here? A deep, authoritative voice interrupted. We all froze. The heavy oak doors had opened again. Standing there was Antoine, the maitre d', looking profoundly uncomfortable. But he wasn't the one who had spoken. Stepping out from behind Antoine was Richard Gallagher. Preston nearly collapsed. Mr. Gallagher, I thought you left. My wife left, Richard said, his piercing blue eyes scanning the 3 of us. I realized I left my reading glasses on the table in the Levine room. I came back to retrieve them. He paused, his gaze landing heavily on Preston, and it seems I arrived just in time to witness a rather unsavory domestic dispute on the sidewalk. It's nothing, sir, Preston stammered, sweat instantly beading on his forehead again. Just a family misunderstanding. My sister-in-law here is… Well, she's a bit troubled. Richard finally turned his attention to me. He squinted slightly in the dim streetlight. The hostility in his eyes slowly vanished, replaced first by confusion, and then by a wide, genuine smile of recognition. Amelia? Richard said, his voice booming with unexpected warmth. Amelia Bennett? Isabella's jaw practically unhinged. You know her? Know her? Richard chuckled, stepping past Preston entirely to extend a hand toward me. Amelia, it's an absolute pleasure to see you again. I haven't seen you since the board meeting in Palo Alto last October. I smiled, shaking his hand firmly. It's good to see you too, Richard. I hope the integration of the Sentinel algorithm is going smoothly at Apex. Smoothly? It's revolutionary, Richard beamed. He turned to a dumbfounded Preston. Your sister-in-law is a genius, Harding. When my private equity firm acquired a controlling stake in Apex Dynamics last year, Amelia's cybersecurity software was the primary reason. She's one of the sharpest analytical minds I've ever had the pleasure of doing business with. Preston looked like he had been struck by lightning. He looked back and forth between Richard and me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. You bought Amelia's software? I don't boast about it, I said to Preston, keeping my voice mild. I prefer to fly under the radar. Richard's smile faded as he looked from my calm demeanor to Preston's panicked sweating and Isabella's tear-stained, furious face. The legendary businessman didn't get to where he was by missing social cues. He pieced the puzzle together with terrifying speed. Harding, Richard said, his voice suddenly dropping an octave, losing all its previous warmth. During dinner, when your card was repeatedly declined, you told me it was a bank error, a security freeze, due to suspicious activity. It was, sir. I swear, Preston squeaked. And yet, I walk out here and hear your wife screaming that you emptied your joint savings to pay the tab, Richard continued, his tone turning to ice. And before that, I hear you berating Amelia, a woman whose net worth dwarfs my entire executive boards, for supposedly ruining you. Did you invite Amelia here tonight just to foot the bill for a dinner you couldn't afford? Silence fell over the street. It was absolute, crushing, and humiliating. I don't do business with liars, Harding, Richard said quietly. It wasn't a shout. It was a death sentence. I don't care if a man is broke. I care if a man is a fraud. You wear a replica Rolex, yes. I noticed the magnification on the date window is off. Your wife carries a fake handbag. You put on a dog and pony show to impress me, using money you didn't have, and when it fell apart, you blamed a brilliant woman who clearly had the good sense to walk away from you. Mr. Gallagher, please, if I could just explain. Don't bother, Richard cut him off, raising a hand. Your firm will hear from my office on Monday. We are pulling our assets. Have a good evening. Richard turned to me, his expression softening instantly. Amelia, Beatrice, and I are hosting a charity gala at the plaza next month. I'd love it if you attended. As my guest, I would be honored, Richard. I smiled genuinely. I'll look out for the invitation. Richard nodded, turned on his heel, and walked down the street toward where his driver had undoubtedly circled back. I was left standing on the sidewalk with Isabella and Preston. The illusion was completely shattered. There was no more fake wealth. There was no promotion. There was only a devastating mountain of credit card debt and a completely ruined career. Isabella stared at me, her eyes hollow, finally understanding the magnitude of what she had thrown away for the sake of appearances. She opened her mouth to speak, perhaps to apologize, perhaps to beg one last time. "Don't," I said, holding up a hand to stop her. "Just go home, Isabella, and don't call me again. You were right about one thing tonight." I turned away, pulling my coat tighter around my shoulders against the midnight chill. We definitely don't run in the same circles. Family boundaries can be the hardest to draw, but sometimes walking away is the only way to protect your peace and your worth. True value isn't measured by the logos you wear, but by the authenticity you carry. If you loved this story about setting boundaries and letting karma do the heavy lifting, hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to the channel for more dramatic real-life stories.